The top one for me is always going to be active listening, which there are many different forms it can take.
We've got a person who is a professional communicator. Ben Pearce has joined us.
So a lot of people in my network in the health space got really, really excited about seeing the words ChatGPT health splashed all over the news.
Neurodiversity has really been talked about a lot. Companies are more neurodiverse aware. The question is, how do you balance being a technical authority with being a leader for the team?
Birmingham is on there. We finally got the second largest city in the UK.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the CTO Lens. We're into the first week in January proper. We've all been busy. What have you been up to, Sophie?
What have I been up to? A mix of things. Just lots of little pockets of kind of work. I'm a bit fractional at the moment, so it's felt like an incredibly busy week for. Is it actually the first week? It is the first full week of January. I feel like it's March a little bit with everything that I've been trying to get through, and already my Saturday is full of things that have been pushed off the bottom of the to-do list, but definitely need to be done before 11:59 on Sunday evening. So I'm chugging through. What about you?
I have been battling with the storm a little bit. I thought I was going to get locked down in Ireland, but I made it through. And but no, I've had a good week this week. My big success, and there'll be a lot of you out there who've joined new companies, is learning to navigate the company's HR policies in the hiring domain. So, it's hard enough to find good talent and all that kind of stuff. And when you get somebody, you go, right now, how do I do this now, sort of thing. And then you get this, well, you fill out this form and you're like, oh, I thought you were just going to say I could just hire them, So, and then there are, 28 people in the company, most of whom are skiing, who have to approve the form. And you're sitting there and you're going, I'm the CIO and it's my budget. Why are all these random people? But I navigated it. And actually, I have to say, in respect to Waterwhite's, the company that I was working at, it was a very simple process, and HR were very supportive of the whole thing, and finance were as well. And it went swimmingly. And I'm now going to make my first hire since I've been there. So I'm very pleased. That feels like, amongst other things, that feels like a success for me this week.
Yeah, I think that's a really big win to make, a first hire in a new organization in the first week of the first month of the first 2026. So no, congratulations. Big achievement. David, a lot has been happening in the news this week, and I'd like to bring you a couple of stories that I'm interested in, and I'm also interested to hear anything that's caught your eye. The top thing that has come to my mind this week is really relevant to something we were discussing in our episode last week, where we were talking about, what are our predictions for 2026? What are the tech trends we're going to see? And one of the things on the list was self-driving cars. And lo and behold, in this week, Nvidia has unveiled a sort of self-driving car technology, not cars so much as a sort of AI platform called Alpamayo, which I think is a fascinating name, that is intended to be used to sort of support AI in self-driving cars. And the reason this is interesting for me is that, Nvidia is really, really known for being primarily a chip supplier, and they're dominating worldwide. Dominating is definitely an understatement in that sector, but this marks a little bit of a move into sort of physical AI being, physical AI ecosystems, or embedding AI in physical products. And it mirrors some other things that we've seen in terms of tech trends recently when we're thinking about, kind of wearables and smart glasses that are embedding AI. But what really caught my eye about this is the reference to this technology is aiming to bring reasoning to cars. And the reason it caught my eye is that I have a few friends who've worked in sort of development of self-driving cars on the tech side. And I remember speaking to one of them years ago and saying, gosh, that's absolutely fascinating. What does your ethics team think? And, if you have a self-driving car and it has a choice of swerving to avoid, maybe there's a kind of elderly pensioner on a pavement, or there's a small baby in a pram and it's got to hit one of them, how is the car going to kind of reason and build a rationale about what it's going to do in an ethical situation that most humans would struggle with, right? This, we've got kind of the trolley problem that doesn't have an answer and is incredibly subjective and incredibly complex. So I'm really interested to see, how this kind of strong ethical challenge in self-driving cars is going to manifest. There's a fantastic quote from Musk, who's obviously developing his own sort of very intelligent technology for cars over at Tesla, where he said that, solving 99% of the problem of this kind of complex reasoning, almost decision-making in autonomous vehicles is easy, 99%, but that 1% is almost impossibly hard. So I think it'll be really interesting to see, what happens in response to this news from Nvidia. David, did you come across this news? What do you think about this?
Yeah, so obviously Jensen tuned in to our podcast last week because then decided, as a result of us talking it up, that he would announce that this is what they were doing over at Nvidia. So that's good that we have those high profile people tuning in, Sophie. So I'm just going to be careful what advice we give them this week. I don't want them to get it wrong and it affect the share price, right? Yeah, so I don't think I'm hugely different to where I was on this last week. It's really, I'll talk about the ethics bit in a second, but it's really interesting, the shift for me here, in that everybody's like, what, Nvidia, the chip makers? The chip makers are making, no, they're not making cars, but they are providing capability directly to make autonomous cars, right? This feels like somebody in the middle's being cut out a little bit. Now they're talking about working with Mercedes, so Mercedes is still there. But suddenly, I mean, Elon Musk must be quaking here, right? So the thing is, it's really like he's brought those two things into one place. And now you've got an expert in one area, Nvidia, working on compute power at massive scales and quickened speeds and stuff like that. And you've got Mercedes, who, well, doesn't matter what your opinion is, they know how to make cars, right? So then, and they're coming together, and yeah, I think it's a fascinating move into physical hardware for Nvidia, right? In that sense, I mean, they make chips, but you know what I mean, right? So I think that in itself is hugely fascinating and is going to spurn other parts of the industry to look at their business models and how they approach things. So that's the first top of the point. In terms of, the ethics and all of that kind of stuff. And yeah, the whole 1% thing. I mean, Musk did say it. I think probably lots of people said it before him about lots of other things as well, and that is often the case, I think that I'm probably too simple on this, Sophie, right? I'm just like, well, the computer will get it right more times than the humans get it right. So I'm kind of okay with it, sort of thing.
Yeah.
That's probably until the first baby gets killed in a pram, right?
Yeah, it is.
And then my human side will kick back in and I'll be like, no, that shouldn't have been allowed to happen. That's totally wrong and stuff like that. So I guess, my kind of, let's go, advance things, let's do it. And my understanding that the technology is, most times going to be much sharper and faster and more comprehensive. I mean, I sit there in Uber cars. I've probably talked about this before, and I watch the, because you've not got anything to do when you're driving along an Uber for 10 minutes in London, and you watch the screen that they have, and it picks out all of the things. When I play this game, can I see the person out the window before the Tesla AI sees them? And I lose every time, right? Now, because I'm old and decrepit and got bad eyesight. But it's basically, I'm like, I'm all in. I'm like, this will be safer, sort of thing. And let's not get into it too much. But sometimes some of my more older relatives, I'm not so sure on their braking sharpness and stuff like that sort of thing. And so you're like, it would be safer for them, So I don't know. There's a pro and a con in there, I think. That's my feeling.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, my first response to that is that I think you need to bring some of that lose every time energy to the mid-episode game. Leave that one there. No, I agree with you about that. Sort of, I think there was some stats that came out a couple of years ago that a number of people, I think 70 plus was the age bracket. It was estimated that if they took their driving test again, they wouldn't pass. And now we're seeing legislation come in about, kind of eye tests or retaking your test for everyone who gets older. And I think you're right. We see new technology coming in and we hold it up to the standard of, is it perfect? Are we going to, 100% of the time make that right choice about, do I want to knock out, an old lady or a baby in a pram? But we don't compare it to reality, which is humans, right? And we would say, well, the first baby in the pram has been killed by an autonomous vehicle, but how many babies in prams were saved by the broader introduction of autonomous vehicles? There's this real nuance that we struggle to appreciate. And the reason I'm interested in this is it's something that comes up in health so much. And David, you and I work in health technology, or we spend some time in that space, and it's certainly a pattern we see there. This algorithm is 98% accurate. Well, it's not 100%, but actually, the average performance for a clinician with a complex problem might be 80%. So this is actually a not so subtle segue into the next piece of news that caught my attention this week, which is ChatGPT Health. So a lot of people in my network in the health space got really, really excited about seeing the words ChatGPT health splashed all over the news. It's not available to test in the UK unless you want to be sneaky and use a VPN. So there has been a little bit of mystery around my more UK-centric networks about what ChatGPT health actually is.
Right.
On the title, it sounds like a kind of a new version of ChatGPT that is, specifically designed and validated to be more effective at supporting people with health challenges. What it looks like it actually is a kind of product packaging level augmentation where rather than having kind of health chats within your standard, here's my question window of ChatGPT, there's going to be a separate area and there's going to be a slight segregation of those conversations. And the rationale that I've been reading about is so that health topics don't come up when you're having general chats. I'm not sure the reason for that. I sometimes use my partner's ChatGPT, so I don't know if there's any sort of like foot warts or something that he would want to ask about that he doesn't want me to know. I hope he doesn't listen to this. So, I mean, is it something to do with that? There's also this opportunity to integrate, ChatGPT with other health information. So, you've got Apple Health, for example, if you're an Apple user like me. And really starting to make use of these modern data ecosystems to do health better. I think we'll have to play around with it and see how well it works. For me, the major challenge is that the technology is still very much slated, it's not a clinician, it's not intended for diagnosis, it's not intended for treatment. It's the same sort of use case as ChatGPT generally. But I do think that seeing the words ChatGPT health at the top of your browser, a lot of people will look at that and say, I can really trust this technology. And I think that's where the challenge comes in because the technology isn't validated to act as a clinician. So, I mean, David, you're an NHS nerd. Like, how does this news sound to you in that context?
So I think, I got excited and then, I don't know, maybe I'm just a bit old and grumpy, but immediately went, this particular article, I looked it up and I went straight to the bottom of it and saw the disclaimer you always see, which you've already referenced, which is like, this is not intended for official healthcare diagnosis. And I'm like, then stop bloody telling us about it, right? Because actually you're not helping, right? You're just hindering the problem. Yeah. Now I've been involved in a couple of initiatives where AI, machine learning, et cetera, whatever you want to call it, has really started to tackle some of the waiting lists that we have in hospitals and the community health services that we run across the NHS. Some real tangible different results. We've previously talked about neurodiversity and the diagnosis of children in neurodiversity, and the waiting list is like currently 4 years long to get a diagnosis and predicted to go to 7 years if we don't change anything soon, right? And yet, from your past, technology life, and I know from some of the stuff that I'm seeing coming into my own trusts, that there are simple ways of using AI, machine learning, to really help that. And so I'm like, could the guys over at OpenAI not have rather than doing some frivolous thing which is just going to worry people more and not really help them because they're like, well, is it a hallucination? It's going to the most common problem rather than the right one, blah, 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 blah. Could they not have turned their money, their strength, their power to actually helping clinicians come up with something which does have medical backing? Right? It would have benefited them because then now we've just got doctors and nurses and clinicians going, oh, somebody else coming up with some smart ass I've been negative about it to sort of paint the flip side, right? Sort of thing. I'll be using it tonight to diagnose my feet warts or whatever I've got, right? But yeah, there's a bit of me just thinking, I don't know, was this the best use of these guys' time? That's kind of, I'm being a bit grumpy about it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And you've actually reminded me of when I first moved into the health tech space and we were playing with a lot of the apps that you could download that sort of, it uses the flash and the camera on your phone. You sort of put your finger over both of them and it tells you your heart rate. But a lot of these apps, you could download them from the App Store, but they weren't validated. And they had this disclaimer saying, this is for entertainment purposes only. I don't know what kind of taste you have to have in the arts to have, you can't go to a museum, you can't watch a film. The highest form of entertainment is seeing what your pulse rate is. But I completely agree with you. I think there are different resources. There are the same resources that we can put in different areas to have more impact, rather than kind of creating these negative externalities. Where yes, of course, everyone diagnoses their foot warts on ChatGPT, so it doesn't matter how much you say, please don't do it. People are going to if you release the technology and put the word health on the top of it.
Yeah. And also, let's flip back to our friend Jensen over at Nvidia, right? Why is he working with Mercedes? Why is he not working with the manufacturers of ambulances?
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All these guys, he runs the most profitable company in the world. They're up in the trillions on the stock market, right? Sort of thing. Can
Yeah.
you divert a little bit of that to helping, the medical world? I don't know. He'll probably say he is, and we just don't know about it, and it's all hidden or something like that sort of thing, right? But it's flashy to talk about, hey, we're putting autonomy in Mercedes, right? Actually, how many more people would buy shares in his company and really support him if he went, we're using this money to help real people with their medical challenges by making ambulances autonomously get to them more quickly?
Oh, love
There's
it.
a
It's
headline.
amazing.
Can I just say he does tune in, as we've already said, so I'm expecting to hear about that in the next week. All right, I'm just saying.
Next week on the news. Yeah, absolutely. No, and it's such an interesting point. I mean, you've definitely raised a point where, if your aliens word begins with a T, you can take your foot off the gas a little bit when it comes to sort of
You can
technology and
experiment a
capitalism.
little bit. You could
You can
help the poorer people a bit, right? You could do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've made a really lovely segue into our next news article, which is, we're talking a lot about Musk. We're talking about OpenAI. Musk is suing OpenAI because they are too profit driven, which I think there's a lot of irony in that. But if anyone's been following the news, and it's not super new, but the timeline is OpenAI, founded as a non-profit research lab in 2015. 2019, they converted to become a for-profit company, but with capped returns. So to sort of the rationale behind this, as stated at the time, was that they needed to raise capital on a larger scale to hire the best talent, and they've done fantastically on that front. But in response, well, whether it's directly responding to that or there are some other kind of slightly subtler reasons behind it, Musk is suing OpenAI. This isn't new, but what is new this week is that this case, it's going to jury. And previously, it was something I think a lot of people said, well, Musk is just doing this because he wanted to become CEO and he didn't get that. So he left the board in 2018. And since then, he's been, incredibly vocal in criticizing the sort of commercialization of this technology, despite founding his own company, XAI, which is a for-profit AI organization. So, is this a valid criticism of severe commercialization of technologies, or is Musk just, a little bit sore because he hasn't got what he wanted out of OpenAI? So I think it'll be interesting to see a little bit more information coming to light as this case goes to jury. I think it's going to be March. So we will be bringing that to you back in our news segment in March. But I think there's this broader piece about, who do we think should be governing these technologies? Who do we think should be deciding whether these technologies are technologies that should be used and leveraged to benefit society more broadly, or whether, as an individual, if you put a lot of, kind of risk and effort and focus into building a foundational technology like this, should you have the agency to, decide who and how much they're able to reap the benefits? So yeah, David, what are your thoughts on this?
There's complexity in here. So there's definitely a sour grapes angle from Musk, of course, right? I
Yeah.
think you're spot on with that. There's a bit of me like one billionaire arguing about another billionaire about who should have the most billions. I'm bored already.
Yeah.
I don't sort of thing. Then there's a more serious note about the jury bit. Do I believe? I don't know about this. Do I believe that a jury is the right forum, the right kind of thinking, if you like? The average person on the street. That's how our juries are made up across the UK and in America. Are
Mhm.
they the right people to make a decision of this kind of magnitude about whether capitalism can happen? Sort of thing. It just feels like, I don't know. I'm not quite sure who should make those decisions, but somebody feels like a more of a governmental thing, and I don't know. So I'm a bit worried that we could be setting a precedent because the media and two big celebrity sort of billionaires want to have it, their day in court and a big battle and a big, sort of thing. And it's like, we might make a decision. We might end up making a decision here which rocks the foundation of capitalism, or so I'm a bit worried
Yeah.
about that, actually. But
Yeah, it's a little bit scary. I was talking with a friend who's actually doing jury duty now about his previous jury duty experience, and I was absolutely shocked at the, he's a highly educated individual, incredibly capable, And he was sort of saying that, when you come to debate with a jury, you'll have people saying, well, I know he did it because I just saw it in his eyes. And you sort of go, okay, well, I don't know if that's how we should be making a decision. But yeah, it's really scary to have, while it's empowering to say a jury of your peers, you'll always have a fair trial. These are people who are, supposedly independent. It's such a complex issue. It almost makes me think of, the referendum where we all had to vote. And yes, you know what you care about, but do you know how the impact of a particular decision is going to play out, socially, economically? Absolutely, you don't. So I'm with you. It's a little bit terrifying to know that it's going to go to jury with the possible scale of the impact.
Yeah, we'll see. Listen, Sophie, I think we've covered a fair bit of news this week. We're gonna bounce on, but for those who think, why didn't they talk about this? Obviously, CES 2026 has been going on. We hear a lot of stuff come out of there. There's so much press around that, so go and read out. Just before we move on, I'm going to tell you about my favorite gadget which came out of that. Right, it was the vacuum that is billed as, it's AI friendly, autonomous, does all sorts of things, right? But the feature they've chosen to highlight, it has pet care mode, baby care mode, all that kind of stuff, but it has an AI mode, and the AI mode will not vacuum up your jewelry that you've left lying about on the floor. I've been waiting for this because obviously when I come in, I just throw off my Cartier watch, throw it on the floor, sort of thing. My cuff links, my Schwartz cuff link, I just throw them on the floor. So, I've been waiting for this device to help pick up my really expensive jewelry that I leave lying around. So I'm really pleased that's been developed.
I love that. So, I mean, it's a problem. I did once hoover up a bracelet by accident, and there was too much crap in the hoover to even want to get it out. So I am impressed with that.
You are the actual.
I am the use case. Sell me one. My favorite was, and whenever CES comes around, there are so many interesting things, and you think, for whom is this a problem, or for whom is this an opportunity? Who is the customer? Because it's, it's consumer focused, right? My favorite was these Panda companion bots. I don't know if you saw that, but it's basically something fuzzy that's kind of an interactive companion. And it's is it technology? Is it a stuffed toy? And we've had them for years. I'm not sure. I think there are so many cases where we throw technology on top of something because we think it's a crazy business opportunity, or we want to get in the news, we want to take it to CES. So I mean, if anyone doesn't typically follow CES when it happens every year, I would absolutely recommend it. You will have so much fun looking at all of the weird and wonderful inventions that people are presenting there.
And if the makers of the Panda bot want to send you and me a Panda bot each, and we'll do an online review on the podcast
absolutely.
live, that's absolutely fine. We'll do that. That's no problem.
Absolutely. Yeah, would love to.
All right. Great week in news. Thanks, Sophie.
So welcome back. Thank you for sticking with us. We want to have a little chat about essential communication skills for modern tech leaders. I had someone recently talking about whether we should refer to these skills as soft skills or core skills. And I think core skills is such a better way to phrase it, because soft skills sound really waffly. But actually, I think communication is one of the most important skills you need to have. And David, I wanted to share with you some of my thoughts on my favorite communication skills that have really helped me in my work.
Yeah,
and I'd love to know. Yeah, I'd love to know what you think as well. So the top one for me is always going to be active listening, which there are many different forms it can take. My favorite is to listen to someone and then reply saying, okay, well, I think what you're saying is X, Y, Z. And obviously you don't want to repeat their words directly back to them, but you're kind of paraphrasing what they're saying, maybe adding a little bit of between the lines. And I've really found this previously to help me, one, avoid miscommunications, because sometimes people will say, no, I didn't actually say that. And you kind of sidestep that awful situation where you kind of walk away and each person's thinking they've agreed on a different thing. But I also really love that it kind of reinforces that you do have a genuinely empathetic intention. The reason you're having the conversation is to understand the other person. But also it creates a sense of collaboration. It takes one person's perspective and it kind of brings it out and puts it on the table, and makes it more of a sort of shared concept that you're iterating on together, rather than this is your perspective and it exists only within your sphere. So that one of my favorites. I think another challenge when it comes to communication is how to balance, particularly with technology, where often there is a lot of context, there's a lot of complexity to technologies we're talking about and ecosystems we're operating in, how to maintain that kind of comprehensiveness and depth while maintaining kind of clarity of what you're communicating. So for me, I always think of this one as, not mistaking clarity for simplicity. You don't want to create that clarity by only presenting half of the story. You want to give the full picture, but then you really need to lean onto those, other communication skills that can really help you kind of achieve clarity in what you're trying to say. So things like constant refocusing, or, one of my favorite is I use a lot of analogies to communicate complex sort of concepts. And I found that to really work quite well with people at all different levels coming from different perspectives.
Love a good analogy.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I'm kind of spitballing lots of thoughts here. David, do you want to jump in? What are your kind of essential communication skills? Is there anything I've said that you disagree with?
No, I don't think so. I want to start with a couple of people talk about communication, right? And communication. We all get that. We all buy into it, right? I am a communicator. I think probably 80% of what I do is communicating upwards, downwards, sideways, all over the place, right? And we all know I talk a lot, yeah? But is that really communicating? So this sort of active listening thing, I came across this a few years ago. I don't know, I was on some training course or other, and we all had to pair off and do active listening. And actually, I think people get that wrong a bit, right? You're all sitting there and you look into each other's eyes and you block out everything and you're like, and you go, yes, I understand, true, because you're showing people that you listen. I think it got overplayed by a bunch of trainers, right? So I think rather than call it active listening, I'd sort of go for in the moment listening, right? I'm here, I'm having a conversation with you, I'm not on my phone, I'm not being, but I might just soak it all up. I might just go, right, okay. Or I might ask you lots of questions. Active listening can be like, hang on, what do you mean? Just clarify that point. Oh, right, okay, now go on. So I think that we shouldn't get too obsessed by the dictionary definition of active listening. And what we should be is we should be there, which is exactly what you said. We should be there and be in the conversation, be part of that conversation, right? So I think there's just a slight nuance on active listening for me there. And then the other thing that I just hate, and I think I hate this because I'm a talker, right, is that everybody's going, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? And I'm just like, I talk a lot, right? I mean, if you haven't noticed this, you haven't been paying attention, right? I talk a lot. I try to make, and partly that's because I'm a storyteller. Partly that's because, and I use lots of analogies, and I try and throw in big words to show how clever I am, and all of that kind of stuff, right? I'm very self-aware that I do that. But I love the word verisimilitude. You come across the word verisimilitude? Look it up if you don't know what it means. It means embellishing the story with pointless stuff just to make it a bit more of a story, right? So I think I love a bit of verisimilitude, yeah, sort of thing. It just makes life more interesting, right? But the point is, at the kernel of it, you have to be saying something. You have to be communicating something rather than just talking or waffling or whatever. And I think that's the other thing. It's like, what are you saying here? If we're just having a chinwag about the state of, Coronation Street or something, that's fine, just waffle on sort of thing. But if you're having a conversation, like you say, the one-to-one conversation, or if you've got a little group of you, just think about what, start with why are we here? What are we talking about? What am I trying to communicate? And then try and stick to that rather than go off on too many tangents. And I'm 100% with you on the analogies, right? I just, storyteller, love an analogy, all of that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, I think you've made a really interesting point, and I think they connect quite nicely what you were mentioning about remembering why you're talking. And yes, there's always a time where you're sharing a glass of wine with a friend, and the purpose of talking is talking. You're not making a point. I think that's often a situation that, isn't really relevant to our work contexts. But certainly remembering why you're talking, I think ties in really nicely to active listening. There's nothing worse than having a conversation with someone and you're trying to communicate something. There's a kind of message you're trying to get across. You're using your words, and all they do is and they're listening to talk. They're not listening. They're kind of waiting to talk.
They're waiting for the in.
Where can I say what I was always going to say, regardless of what you've said? And so I think I think the active listening really plays into, why are we having this conversation? Why am I sitting here listening to you? It's because I want to understand what you're trying to tell me. So I think, we're talking about communication skills. And I think when we do that, we often focus on how do we produce, words and concepts that other people are going to access. But I do think a huge part of communication skills is also knowing how to listening. And it's not just knowing to say the phrase, I think I'm hearing you say X. Is that what you're trying to communicate? But it's actually, all of the kind of the approach and the psychology and almost the ethics of caring about what other people have to say that go into that.
Your point, actually, I fall victim to this sometimes, but I'd like to. I think one of the things that you've previously talked about is explaining to people how you like to communicate, right? So I'm a big one for this, right? Both in written and spoken communication. So when I join a new company, new team, particularly with my team, when you're dealing with your fellow execs or whatever, that's different. But when you're dealing with your team around you, and they're all a bit sort of like, oh, what's the new boss like, and all that kind of stuff, right? I literally tell them how I like to do written communication. So, for example, it's just my style. I say, I will read every single email that you send me, every single one, but I might not get to the bottom of the email, right? Because I'll make a decision as I start to read it on whether I need to read all of this, whether it's pertinent to me or whatever. I might flag it for later consumption or whatever, right? So I basically say to them, don't send me a big, long, waffly email that says nothing and put a really important point at the bottom because I'll miss it, right? Because I'm processing lots and lots of information. So I tell them, bang me at the top with the key point you want to make. You might then go on some waffle, and it's like I'll read on, because you've got my attention on. But that's how to do it. That's how to do it. And you know what? People look at you on the first day and they're like, "Who is this bloke who's just?" And then they get it, and then they learn to communicate. And I I like to do the same with other people. I did. I'm sure you've done this, Sophie, and lots of our listeners will have done this. You've been involved in these exercises where, I don't know, usually you get some external coach come in and you all fill out forms, and it goes into a machine and it tells you that you're red or you're blue or you're this or you're whatever, right? All of those kind of things, right? I did one a couple of years ago with a team that I was with, and it had added something which I hadn't seen before. And what it had added was a section on how this person, so me, because it was my report, how this person likes to be communicated with. So it worked out, and they're always accurate. You always read them and go, "Yeah, that's me. That is me," right? Sort of thing. And it was like, David likes to be involved in a storytelling conversation. He likes to go off. He likes to know how you are at the start of the story and have a little bit of pleasantries up the top. And he doesn't want to rush a conversation. And it was like, and then I read the same information about each of my fellow peers, and it was like, I never knew that. Like he doesn't like to waffle. He's not interested in talking about his personal life. He just wants to get straight into the problem and then disappear off. He's a quick, sharp shooter. So, and just knowing how my peers preferred their preferred method of communication, it was like a game changer. It was just like, right, now I'll go up to that person, I'll communicate to them in the style that they like, and it will be productive and efficient. And it was. So we should all map ourselves a little bit and be, where if I'd saying, talk to me in stories, or give me short, sharp directions, or shout at me, or cuddle me, or do you know what I mean? That would just make the world go around so much better, wouldn't it?
I love it. I'm waiting for, coming into work with a t-shirt that says cuddle me and I'll listen. But it's such a good point, right? And I think there's this challenge that we come into these professional contexts and you're always trying to look as if you know everything. You don't, particularly when you're entering a new environment, you don't want to expose all of the things that you're unsure about. And I think that really kind of goes against this approach of coming into a new environment and saying, hey, here's how I work, but I'd really like to understand and be explicit and just ask the super simple question, how do you like to be communicated with? And so I think there's, we feel that we need to guess, or we need to work it out, or we need to just know this stuff off the bat, but we absolutely don't. And the impact it can have is massive. I'll give you an example from my personal life. If I'm in deep focus on something and I'm interrupted, I'm immediately irate. I'm working on it. It's, it's a work in progress. And it could be, hey, by the way, the house is on fire. I think we need to leave. Or, hey, would you like £1 million and a kitten? Doesn't matter what it is. I will immediately be irate to be disrupted from deep focus.
Got it.
And kind of appreciating that and just telling anybody, hey, if I have heads down and I look like I'm thinking really hard, give it a couple of minutes, wait until I'm wandering around in the kitchen or, scrolling on my phone or something like that. And it's a really minor change, but the impact it can have is huge. And so, kind of getting to a place of self-awareness, but also getting to a place of confidence to ask other people, altogether the influence it can have on how an organization comes together to communicate effectively is just cannot be overstated.
I think it is. We should all just have a, how do you like to be communicated to, amnesty. Not be shy about it. Just go, this is how I decide. And then just touching on that a little bit, and then maybe we'll get our guest in, who you'll find out about in a minute, to talk about some real world challenges around communication in the workplace. But who is the onus on here? Is it for me to understand how you like to be communicated to, and me meet you in your communication comfort zone, or is it the other way round? How does that work? Because I like to think that I can tune myself to the environment and be flexible, but I also know how I like to be communicated to. So I'm not sure when you pick. Is it me or is it them? Am I going to there? Is the mountain coming to Mohammed, or is the Mohammed going to the mountain? Which way does that work?
Yeah, it's really tricky. And I think I've heard a saying that in relationships, and whether that's a professional relationship or a personal relationship, it's not 50-50 adds up to 100. It should be 70-70, and everyone is going the extra mile and kind of giving more than their half, right? And so I think that's something that we can certainly apply in communication. Let's both the mountain and Mohammed, they're kind of both making efforts to come towards each other. But I don't know if there's a hard and fast answer for me. I mean, I've worked in contexts. For example, I worked at a company that was focused on neurodiversity, and we had a really wonderfully neurodiverse team there. And that actually meant that for a lot of people, the impact of shifting their communication style was, really challenging and a real drain on their energy. And so, for me, as someone who has always felt quite comfortable adapting my communication style, I feel like that's my responsibility to say, well, actually, it's a little bit easier for me, so let me come a little bit further in your direction.
Right.
And, kind of really having that honest conversation about what each person can do. You never want to have someone in a business who says, well, I'm not going to do it because it's hard for me, when actually they just can't be bothered, right? But how do you tell that? So I don't know, maybe that's something that our guest has a perspective on.
Yeah, maybe. Listen, let's get him on. Guys in the background who press the magic buttons, please bring Ben to the front so that we can see him. Hey, Ben! How you doing?
Hi, Ben.
I'm very well. How are you? All okay?
Yeah, we got you. We can hear you now, Ben. That's good. As I was saying, we've got a person who is a professional communicator, really focused in this area. Ben Pearce has joined us. Thanks for joining us, Ben. I'm going to give you a chance to introduce yourself in a moment. Then we're going to throw a couple of real-world communication problems at you, see what your professional opinion on that is, and then we'll let you talk to us about your mission for better communication in the workplace. Does that sound okay?
That sounds wonderful.
Brilliant. Okay, well, you and I have met in a previous life, Ben, because I've been on your fabulous podcast. Thank you for having me. Hopefully I didn't disappoint.
You did not. It was wonderful. Yes. So it was a pleasure to have you on, and it's lovely to see you again. It's the first time I've seen you in the new year. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. And let me introduce you to the lovely Sophie Valentine. Sophie is my co-host on the CTO Lens. And yeah, she's a taskmaster. She'll get into it with you, Ben.
I'll be gentle, I promise. It's a pleasure to meet you, Ben, and really looking forward to hearing all of your wonderful insights.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Ben. Give yourself an intro.
Yeah, well, so my background is I've worked in tech for years. I spent 20 years working at Microsoft, about 10 of those deep technical roles, always sort of customer-facing roles. And then about 10, 11 years leading teams. And so I led technical pre-sales teams, consultancy teams, customer success teams. And then about 3 years ago, I left to set my own company, focusing on developing the human skills of people in the tech world. There was a lot of people focusing on how they learn tech really well, but not a lot of people focusing on all those other skills, which I was finding was the really important ones. So yeah, I started a company to do that.
Well, that's really great. Human skills, Sophie and I were discussing earlier on that some of these communication skills and other sort of skills that people call soft skills definitely shouldn't be called soft skills, should they, Ben? They're not soft skills. They're hard skills, or in your view, human skills, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So often the technical answer is relatively straightforward. The problem is navigating all the people, getting them on board, and that's all really human or hard skills. It leads to success. If you haven't got that, it will always lead to failure. So yeah, I think they're super important.
Excellent. Well, so we were talking sort of generically about the importance of communication. And we were talking about a little bit of active listening. I was confessing I probably talk a bit too much, but I do listen as well. Sophie was sharing some of her sort of favorite ways of communicating with people and how to make sure that, you're engaged in the conversation of present and all that kind of stuff, right? But let's just ask you, Ben, about a couple of sort of, some of the modern day challenges that are coming our way, right? So Sophie, you've got a couple in here. Why don't you throw them at Ben?
I do, yeah. I think that the first example that probably applies to a number of people who are in our sort of listener base, and is certainly something I've experienced extensively, particularly in tech teams, is working with these kind of virtual and distributed teams. So every interaction you have, it's kind of through a video screen and you don't see people's hands, you don't kind of feel their emotion coming through the screen. Maybe you've got a 30-minute call, so you don't get any of the kind of water cooler benefit where you kind of pick up those little implicit things that, they didn't come up in the call, but actually they're really, really crucial. And I think something that often goes hand in hand with that is incorporating different kind of languages and cultures, working with tech teams that can be distributed across the globe. I would love to know, Ben, I mean, is this a scenario that you think about a lot in your work supporting people with those human skills? And do you have any advice for our listeners who might be facing those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, start off with an easy one. No, that's a tough one, right? That is like that is like the hardest thing, right? It seems to me that, in terms of easy to hard, it's really easy if you're in a room with somebody, if you've had a chance to think about things, people, because so much of communication is about eye contact, body language, all of those sorts of things. So if you take that now right to the other end, where perhaps it's a Teams call or a Google call with cameras off, delays, we had a few technical issues as we were sorting this all out. People with English as a second language, different culture. It's really hard, right? Let's be honest, that's really hard. For me, there's a few sort of principles that I would put in, I would probably use. The first thing is it's about being a bit audience centric, really. So often it's about, I need to get my point across. I want to say what I want to say. It's about me. And actually, if we all spent a little bit of time audience or listener centric, thinking, well, actually, who am I talking to? What's important to them? Can I empathize with them a little bit? Can I be a bit more relevant to them? And that covers so much. Whether there's a difference in technical capability, where there's a difference in people with different culture, or a difference in people with different language skills. If you're just trying to be a bit more empathetic, put yourself in the shoes of the listener, and then try and be relevant, I think that's immediately going to take you up a couple of points and lead you to maybe do things like pop the camera on, or things like that. That's going to help the conversation go well. So I think a bit of empathy and a bit of listener centricity, I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. David and I was chatting before you came on about, what is the purpose of communication? What's the why behind your communication, but your sort of communication approach, or even just what you're saying, and how can you use that to make sure that you're not just talking for the sake of talking or saying what's interesting to you, but actually to drive forward a goal that maybe is a shared goal across your organization. Maybe it's just you and this individual, but ultimately there should be a goal beneath anything that you're saying.
Yeah. And I think, building on that, there's a difference between efficiency and effectiveness. A really efficient way for me to say something is to tell you what to do. Do this. I've thought of something great in my brain. Now you do it. But of course, people don't like being told what to do, and people, don't maybe react and take that on board. Whereas an effective way to do that is to have a two-way dialogue with people, to talk about the why, the how, the details, the objections. And if you have, which takes longer, right? Because it's a longer conversation, but it's a far more effective conversation. So if you move from this, I'm going to tell you what I think, to we're going to, and you mentioned active listening there. Active listening is about this kind of two-way. I'm listening, but I'm asking questions. I'm summarizing. It's an active thing. So I think there's a difference between efficiency and effectiveness. And I would encourage people to try and be effective at communications, not efficient at communications.
I think that's really
Absolutely.
good. I think that's nice. And actually I'm feeling more comfortable now, because what we were talking about earlier is that I'm a storyteller and I love lots of verisimilitude. I love to put in lots of irrelevant details to pad the whole story out. But actually, I think I'm trying to be an effective communicator rather than an efficient communicator. And largely I know, because my team then go forward and implement what we discussed, right? And so you get that sort of silent feedback of, like, if everybody leaves the room and nothing happens, you're like, oh, what happened there? We didn't get it. So I'm pleased that I can breathe and be effective and not efficient, and not worry about my efficiency and brevity in my communication.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I think, is meeting people where they are. So everybody's got a different kind of communication style. There's loads of like psychometric tests that help you. Like Myers-Briggs is the famous one. You've got Discovery Insight, DISC, all of those things. My favorite one is Discovery Insight, where you're a red, a blue, a yellow. But some people are very direct, specific communication. Some people like very creative, big picture communication. Some people like real detail. I'm going to fully understand this. Some people like to think about the human implications of what's going on. And so actually understanding that everybody is different, and that then actually I can adapt my style a little bit. If I know who's in the audience and I know they're very direct, if I tell a story about a flower and the sun rising, I know they're just going to get angry, so I can turn up and kind of adapt my style and be really direct with them, because that's how they appreciate it. And that's how we're going to have an effective conversation. Similarly, if there's somebody that likes to think about the detail and I give them a direct point and no detail, that they're going to be frustrated by that communication. So, I think you can adapt your style to suit the people that you're talking to.
Yeah. And Ben, I'd love to know your perspective on this, because David and I were chatting on the same topic just a few moments ago. And David raised a really excellent question of whose responsibility is it to be flexible? And certainly when I've worked in organizations and I'm the junior and you're speaking to your CEO, you go, okay, it's all on me. I need to work out exactly how they need to hear this, and they can just be themselves. But is that how you see it? Is it something where we should always be thinking about everyone else's preferred communication styles and putting a bit of effort into it, no matter who we are? What's your perspective?
Yes, I think if everybody gave another 10% of trying to be more engaging and effective to everybody else, and went 10% less about me and 10% more about everybody else, wouldn't that be a wonderful place? Now, that said, like if we're in the middle of a business down situation, something's got to happen. There is a time for a more command and control type, communication. There definitely is. I think it's less often than a lot of people think. And actually, if we all spent a little bit more thinking about the other people rather than just at getting our point of view across, we'd all be far more effective. So I'd say let's all take ownership of that a little bit.
That's great. That's really good. We're going to make this podcast 10% more about our audience, Sophie. That's what we're going to do from now on, right? We're going to think about them a little bit more to communicate effectively to them. I think that's good. One other area that just to touch on, because it's very relevant. We hear a lot about it in today's society and in the workplace in particular. Neurodiversity has really, been talked about a lot. Companies are becoming a lot more neurodiverse aware. In actual fact, a lot more neurodiverse pro, seeking out that diversity, that neurodiversity, or sometimes I call it cognitive diversity, right? So I think because they're understanding the benefits. But again, that's gonna put an impact on communication sometimes, isn't it? Because now you've got to sort of tune yourself for different types of thinking, haven't you?
It does. And what a great question. I did on my other podcast that you came on, I did a topic on ADHD. It came out just this very week. Let me give you a data point from this, because I thought this was fascinating, right? There's a big survey done, like lots and lots of people, and they asked leaders, how many people do you think in your team are diverse? Neurodivergent.
Yeah.
And the answer was about 3%. So on average, leaders thought about 3% of their team were neurodivergent. Then they asked people generally, do you identify as neurodivergent? So maybe ADHD, autism, something like that. The figure of self-identification was 50%. So 50% of people in tech in this survey would identify as neurodivergent. Leaders thought about 3% of their team were. So there's a massive difference that's going on there. Now, I'm not an expert in this by any means. I want to make that really clear. But what I talked about with this expert, it was Sam Bramall I was talking to, was absolutely in the same way we talked about Discovery Insights or Myers-Briggs, and we would think about people that are maybe more direct or more people focused, that sort of thing. I think we need to embrace that a little bit more and be educated, so that it almost becomes like default behavior, right? How do we really effectively, if we're neurotypical like me, I am neurotypical, how do I engage really effectively? How do I adapt my style if I'm working with people that are with autism or people with ADHD or whatever other neurodivergency there may be? I need to be a bit more educated on that. And again, if everybody does a little bit of that, we can get the best out of everybody. And suddenly you've got all of these people with great skills that perhaps we haven't tapped into and really harnessed. So I think it's a bigger problem than people think. Certainly from that data point that I think I'm getting right and relaying to you.
Yeah, I think it absolutely makes sense. And I think this is something that while we're starting to talk about it, there's much more we can do in a more sort of formal, systematic approach in the workplace. I actually have a friend who recently has started a consultancy where she works with businesses specifically on this topic and kind of works with leadership to say, well, hang on, as you say, are you aware a lot of assumptions around, "Oh, we don't have any neurodiverse people here. And oh, actually, yes, you do. And they don't necessarily have an understanding of the impact that not appreciating and adapting where necessary to different preferences in communication or different ways people are comfortable communicating can have on businesses. And it's really something that I think needs absolutely a lot more attention, but very much from the leadership perspective. I've worked in companies where, particularly during COVID, when everyone was working at home for the first time, and you would have your head of people go, "Come on, guys, turn on your camera. I want to see your smiling faces. We're still a community." But actually, for some people, that's really uncomfortable for them. It's really going to drain their energy. It's going to make them much harder to contribute at work. And so it's both, individuals communicating with each other on a one-to-one basis, but it's also the structures that as leaders we put in place within our organizations and knowing what to do to support that it's
Sophie,
tricky, but it's very impactful.
I tackle that by telling people I have a preference for cameras on. I'm very clear. I say my preference is that everybody has their camera on. If you have a reason why that's challenging or hard for you, that's absolutely fine. If you feel comfortable, ping me in the background and tell me so that I'm, just sort of don't point it out or anything like that, or say, "Oh, have you not got your camera on by accident or whatever?" But for all the good reasons that we were talking about in the first question we asked Ben about communicating in a more distributed workforce, I have a preference for that. I'm just not going to force people to do it or make them feel uncomfortable. So I sort of balanced it like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm now trying to work out whether it's appropriate. If you do find yourself taking a call from the bath, for example, which I'm sure we've all done once every now and again, is that a valid reason to turn your camera off? Possibly. Might hear the splashing in the background.
It depends. Well, I'm sort of not in a good shape at the minute, so I'd probably say camera off for now, But.
Yeah,
Listen,
and I
Ben.
think, carry on.
No. So listen, I just we want to give the floor over to you a bit and let you talk about, the mission you're on with your five letter acronym. Anyway, I'll let you do all that in a second, right? But I just wanted to ask you something, because this is a really interesting thing for a person who's in the world of professional communication. On your LinkedIn profile, in the about section where you say, "Hey, check out my profile," you've got a long storytelling version about what you're doing, what your mission is and stuff like that. But just in front of that, you've got a TLDR.
Yeah.
And it says, "I help smart people become better communicators and presenters. I make them more influential and successful. I work with big teams or individuals." And I'm like, thanks, Ben. Now I don't have to read your long version. So where does that go for you? As a professional communicator, TLDR is like a recent thing that people are using, right? So I think, is it acceptable? Are you being a bit quirky there? What's your view on that?
Wow, I was worried that you were going to find all kinds of typos and problems with my LinkedIn profile when you started there. Well,
I didn't read beyond the TLDR, mate. So
no, exactly, and it's like the executive summary, of olden days, that we talk about. Everything needs an executive summary. So for me, that was about, I want to say in a sentence what I do. And I think as you described it, I was marking myself going, "Oh, is that right? Oh, am I going to regret this? I haven't looked at that for months." But it is, that's what I do. And there are people that will go, "That's enough." Right, now I know. Then there are people that might go, "Well, what does he mean by that?" And so that's why I've got a bit more information in there, And as people are maybe thinking about working with me, they might, the first time they come across my profile, "Oh, that's interesting." Then suddenly in 6 months they go, "Actually, my team isn't really effectively managing some of our business sponsors and we need some help. Let's find a bit more information." So for me, it's about trying to have communication that is fit for different situations, and you can tap into the bit that works for you when you need it. So that was my approach.
And again, there's a good living example of how understanding different people like to be communicated to in different ways, and you've dealt with both of them. That's great. Brilliant answer. Ben, go into your mission. What are you banging on about at the minute? What is the passion project that you've got that you're leading us here on?
Well, I mean, the thing that I'm spending most of my time doing at the moment, and in fact, I've been off this week running a workshop with a load of data tech leaders, is what I call technical storytelling. So it's working with people in tech on that, what I call their storytelling skills. But really, that means, are they good at influencing people? Can they communicate effectively? Can they present well? And ultimately, can they get stuff done? Can they drive action? So that's what I spend the vast majority of my time doing is what I call technical storytelling. I thought what might be useful to go through was a little framework that I often tee off the course with, that whenever leaders are thinking about, I either need to do a presentation or I've got an important meeting coming up, just a little framework that they can just run through in their heads, which sort of sets them up for success. I just thought that might be useful to share with folks.
Go for it. Take us through it. We're all ears.
Right. So it's an acronym. I love an acronym because I love to be able to hang my thoughts on something and remember it. So the acronym is AUREN. AOREN. AUREN.
Sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings.
That's exactly what I thought. So yes. So for anybody with that likes Tolkien, just think of like some elven king or something. But it stands for something that's quite useful, actually. So it stands for, so A is audience, O is objective, R is remembered. I almost forgot the remembered bit then. That would have been terrible. E is emotion, and N is next steps. So this isn't a flow or a structure that you work through, but when you've maybe got, right, I've got an important meeting that I need to speak to the board, or I've got to go and speak to a customer, I've got to present on this topic. I literally, the first thing I do is I whip through and I go, right, who's going to be in the audience? Do I know the people? Do I know the personas? So maybe I've got CTOs, or I've got developers, or I've got marketing managers. I might know the types of personas. And can I jot those down? Then I go, right, objective. So what is it I want to achieve by doing this presentation? But then the other important bit, what do the people listening to me want to achieve? They're sat there going, I can't wait until Ben speaks about thing. What is that thing that they can't wait for you to speak about or explain or do? So can you jot that down? Then remembered. So this would be like, what are the things you want them to remember? And that might be 3 things, that might be 2 things, that might be 4 things. That's not 117 things. It's not 25 things. It's not a feature checklist, of 197 things. That might be 3 things. I want you to remember that, I don't know, this thing I can do is going to cost you a lot less. It's going to perform a lot better, but it's going to take us a month to get there. Or so. Those might be the 3 things that I want you to remember.
Focus. Yeah.
That's it. So I'm just jotting those down. This is before I even think about slides or stories or demos or anecdotes or anything like that. Then the next thing I'd think about is emotion. Now, there is a brilliant quote from Maya Angelou, and the quote is, people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I think in tech, we very rarely sit down and think, how do I want these people to feel when I leave them? Do I want them to feel bored, overwhelmed, wishing they hadn't met me? Those, or do I want them to maybe understand there's a burning platform, but they've got confidence in me that I know how to fix it, or whatever. What is that emotional feeling, and how am I going to do it? And that's a really important thing that we don't do in tech, which is why I call that out very specifically for sort of folks in tech. So we've got audience, objective, remembered, emotion, and then the final thing is the next steps, right? Because the meeting or the presentation, it's always about driving action, right? It's getting something done. And so often the strategy would be, there'd be a meeting, no agenda, and then you get there, some presentation would be delivered, and someone would say, can you send me the slides? Yeah, I'll send you the slides. And that's the strategy for the next action, right? Well, no, we want this done by this person, this done by this person, this done by that date. And so just having a bit of clarity in your mind, what's the next thing that I want to happen from this? So literally you take this Aurum framework. So when you're prepping for a meeting, who's in the audience? What do we want to achieve? What do I want them to remember? How am I going to connect with them with a bit of emotion? And what do we need to do next? What we want to do next? And then as I start to think about, do I need a slide deck? Do I not need a slide deck? Do I need a demo? Do I not need a demo? Should I tell an anecdote? Should I not tell an anecdote? You keep referencing it back to these things and going, if it supports that audience in remembering this thing, let's include it. And if it doesn't, let's be brutal. Let's cut it out. It's too much detail. Less is more. Let's get rid of stuff. So that little framework, and I use it all the time. Like if I get asked to speak at a conference, that's the first thing I do. If I'm speaking to a senior leader and it's an important meeting, that's the first thing I do. And it helps me get clarity on all the other decisions I'm going to make about the communication because I've got that little template that I filled out.
That is so powerful. It's just those 5 things, and the way you wove them together, for me, was it itself was a bit of a story, right, sort of thing, and so it just kind of so we will remember it, hopefully, unlike you. But I think it's really helpful for our audience here are leaders. Some are very experienced, some are new leaders, some are wannabe leaders, right? And I think, Sophie, you and I were touching on this earlier, it can be quite daunting to suddenly be the person who's there up front, giving the advice. And so I think, having that, it gives you a bit of confidence, surely. It just makes you think like, yeah, I can do this. I've got my points. I can stick to it. I can make sure I get it right. So I think that's really powerful. What do you think, Sophie?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. And I mean, certainly hearing you talk, Ben, it's clear that you're singing from your own hymn sheet, and the way you just communicated with us was, and indeed with our audience as well, super clear, super memorable, feeling a little bit of emotion as well. So you definitely hit the nail on the head there. And I think my favorite thing about it, and particularly referencing David's point of sometimes when you make that transition into being a senior leader, the senior leader, and everyone's looking up at you, you want to feel supported, but equally you don't want to have any sort of false friends, easy answers that don't fit your situation. So my favorite thing about this framework is that it kind of tells you roughly what you want to achieve, but it doesn't tell you how. So, definitely it's always going to be true that you want people to remember something of what you've said, but it doesn't say exactly, it doesn't kind of define for you how to do that because it's going to be so different for every situation. Some companies are very verbal, some are, very asynchronous, and having that sort of support as well as the flexibility, I imagine makes it a very broadly useful framework.
Yeah, and it still leaves a lot of work, right? So if you just take that, let's say that audience bit, and I think that's one of the most important bits, because where most people in tech get it wrong is because they are irrelevant, because they have not empathized with the people they're speaking to. And that may well be that they talk too much tech depth, if they are talking to senior leaders. Or that may be that they talk to engineers and there isn't enough depth, because they're thinking, well, I'm a business leader, and now they're leaving massive gaps, So that is a whole piece in its own. Well, how do I understand and empathize with these people? And so just the next level of detail, if I might, just on audience, but I won't for all of them, is to then go, right, so if I'm thinking about a persona, if I'm thinking about I need to talk to somebody on the board, let's say a CEO, I want them to think about, well, what's the pain they're facing at the moment? I want to think about what are they trying to achieve? I want to think about why are they doing it now? And what does paradise or nirvana or whatever it is look like for them? And if I can think about that for the people that I need to influence, then that means even the topic that I'm going to talk about, which might only just influence that a little bit, I'm still going to use language that's talking to the pain they're facing. I'm going to use language that's talking about where they're trying to get to. So that whole piece is a big piece in its own right. But if you can just sort of start to get into that, suddenly your relevance goes up. And if you're relevant, you're valuable. And if you're valuable, you're influential. And that's where you start to become really successful.
And I think we see this not just in our professional sort of technology leadership, world, but we see this all over the world, right? Let's not get political about it, but Trump is a communicator, right? All he really does is communicate, right? And therefore he influences because of the way. Now, not everybody likes his method of communication, but he's there. He's getting the messages out there and stuff like that. And the world is full of people who you wouldn't necessarily think are the most successful people in the world, but they're damn good communicators, right? Because they're focused on doing that. And so I think, the lesson we can learn there, and I like the way you framed it, Ben, right? I've often talked about the fact that in the C-suite, being an executive, and you don't really get this until you get there, you're across so much, and it's quite an interesting, stressful world. And I think, the people reporting into you can sometimes be, why have I got to communicate in that way? Why have I got to pander to him or her or whatever sort of thing? And actually, I think the way you framed it, as in think about how you can help them with whatever it is they're trying to achieve by being really clear with your communication, I think that's good, and it'll help us all move forward.
Mm. And Ben, if our audience are keen to read more, as you've given an example of you've got this kind of Orin top level, and then it actually goes a little bit deeper. If our audience are keen to find out more, where should they go?
Yeah. Do you know what? I've been very professional and created a little landing page. So if you go to www.elevatedu.live/CTO lens, you can get everything there. You can find out about the technical storytelling professional program, my podcast, where you can connect with me on LinkedIn, all of that kind of stuff. So elevatedu.live/CTO lens, and you can find everything there.
We'll make sure we get that link in the bio for you as well, Ben. Thank you for doing that. Now, Ben, we're going to let you go now, and Sophie and I are going to carry on with the podcast. But there's just one small piece of communication advice I'd like to give Sophie, if that's all right. Just a small area of communication I feel she's been struggling with. We have something in the CTO Lens podcast called the mid-episode game. It's a very contentious, high-profile, impactful game, right?
I've seen it. I've seen it. Yes.
And Sophie, despite massive amount of cerebral effort that she throws at it, unfortunately, is 4-0 down. Now, what Sophie needs is she needs a communication masterclass in how she tells all of her family and friends without them being disappointed in her. Any advice there, Ben? Any advice? Or Ben hangs up and leaves.
Yeah, hang up.
It's okay. It's okay. They're already disappointed, so it's in for a penny at this point.
Yeah, you're meeting expectations, so everyone's happy.
Yes.
Excellent. I won't put you any further on the spot, Ben. Ben Pearce, thank you very much for joining us on the CTO Lens. Fabulous pieces of information, and we'll get all your link in the bio afterwards, so that's great.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers, Ben. Have a good day.
See you. Bye-bye.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We have Games Master Extraordinaire Luke has joined us for the mid-episode game. Have we heard from ITV? Are they wanting to commission this game yet, Luke? Have they got in touch? Is that?
No, unfortunately, Ant and Dec can do the host justice, so we're going to have to carry on as we are for a little bit longer. But what a game we have in store for this week's mid-episode game.
Roll up, put down your cup of Rosie Lee. It's time to play Name That UK Tech City.
Sophie and David, welcome to the 5th edition of the mid-episode game. So this week we are looking at the UK's top tech cities. So I found an article from Ramsack, and if you want to dispute any of the answers, you can go take it up with their content editors, not me. So what we are looking for are the top tech cities in the UK. The two metrics that they are being judged on are the number of established technology companies and the average yearly salary for a technology worker. So I'm not going to let you guess the first one because it's too obvious. Obviously, London is number one. So I'm looking for the other 9. We'll do first to 4, and if you both get to 4 at the same time, then we'll do a special tiebreaker quiz.
Ladies and gents.
Yes, as you brought a special guest, we'll let you go first.
Yeah. She has suggested Cambridge.
Cambridge is not on the list, so we're off to a tough.
I'm out.
Like I said,
take it up. Yeah.
With Ramsack. David.
Bristol.
Bristol is number 3. 1 point to David.
I feel
Sophie.
like David shouldn't be allowed to have Bristol because I lived there for 7 years.
Yes.
But I'll cross that off my list. I'm gonna do a callback to our last episode. Swindon? Was it Swindon was the number 3 of Tech Hub? No, not Swindon.
No, it's not Swindon either. But the thinking was great.
For the exact same reason. Swindon will now become one of the tech cities as far as I'm concerned.
It will
become, we've said it.
But it's not currently.
Okay.
Oh, I see. Okay.
All right, Manchester.
Manchester is number 6. 2-0 to David.
I'm gonna do what I did before and hope that I was unlucky last time and lucky this time. Oxford.
It's not on the list either.
Oh, for God's sake. This is rigged.
I had it as well. Leeds.
Leeds is not on there. But don't give up hope, Sophie, because comebacks have been the theme of the mid-episode game.
The theme of the mid-episode game. Okay, I'm going to say Belfast then.
Not on there either.
Oh,
Liverpool.
Nope.
Oh my goodness.
Cardiff?
Nope.
Well, I'm going to go local and go Norwich.
Nope.
Or Norwich will be very disappointed about that.
Yeah. Edinburgh.
Nope.
Oh.
Bournemouth.
No, a fantastic city. The second home to my education, but no, not quite on the
I
list.
love Bournemouth. Bournemouth is my wife's favourite childhood place.
Well,
Ah, that's nice. I once went clubbing in Bournemouth and there were 3 hen parties and it was like 90% of the capacity of the club. It was great. I'm going to say Newcastle.
Newcastle is number 2 on the list, Sophie.
Yes.
She's back in the game. That's 2-1.
Ipswich.
You can't just say places near where you live and hope that they get on there.
Ipswich is the home of BT.
Well, it's not the home of tech, according to Ramsack.
Interesting. I'm going to say somewhere near to where I grew up, Guildford.
No.
Okay,
I
that
want
makes
you to
sense.
start thinking slightly more stereotypical places in the UK.
Stereotypical. I don't know what that
What does
means.
that mean?
It's not stereotypical, more common places in the UK.
I did all of my common places and they were all
That's the
wrong.
wrong word either.
Peterborough.
No. You're missing some major towns and cities in here.
There's no way we're missing major towns and cities.
I don't think so.
You've
I
got
need to
so
spend
far
more
you've got
time in the
London,
north.
Newcastle, Bristol.
York.
York is not on there. You've got London, Newcastle, Bristol, Manchester, and that's it.
Glasgow.
No.
Aberdeen.
No.
Sorry, I'm just shouting out. now.
Do it. I need. Can I bring up a map? Is that permitted? Just a
yeah.
map. Just if I just Google map of the UK.
At this point, both of us are losing. Sophie. We're just randomly guessing.
Okay. Okay. According to this app, I can buy on Etsy for $4.99. Blackpool.
No.
Warrington.
Oh,
Just keep shouting. I'll say when you're right.
Birmingham.
Birmingham is on there. We finally got the
Yes.
second largest city in the UK.
Oh my
That is
God,
number 5.
Yeah, but have you been to Birmingham?
I have.
It's not great. Anyway,
It's good for
Bradford.
cricket.
Bradford.
No.
Not Bradford. Back to the map. Coventry.
Yes, Coventry is on there. Coventry is number 8. So that makes it 3-2 to Sophie.
Hull.
No.
Hull was the city for culture or something. This
Yeah, but
year,
not for tech.
maybe.
That's what we're looking for in the game.
Yeah, not for tech. Exeter.
No.
Leicester.
Leicester is number 9. David, back in the
Ooh.
game. We're at 3-3.
We're tied.
So we're now going to sudden death. If Sophie gets it correct and David doesn't, Sophie wins. Likewise, David.
Okay.
Oh.
Sheffield.
No. It was on the
Okay.
list that I almost used, but not a bad guess.
I don't think you've said this, and I think I've got the winner. Cardiff.
I said
Um,
Cardiff.
Sophie
and it
said
was not
Cardiff
on the
earlier.
list.
It still isn't on the list.
Right. What other cities have we got? I'm glad I'm wearing my glasses, but it's still quite small.
This would be great for the visual viewers. You two,
You've got a really
as close as you
great
possibly
close-up
get
of
to
your
the
forehead
screen.
now. Your skin looks great, Sophie, just for the record, you know.
Okay. So
So we're looking for
I
either
think we've
number
done them all.
4, number 7, or number 10 for the win.
Okay. I'm going to do a curveball and say Colchester.
No.
Swansea.
No.
Uh,
We've got one in
pass.
the north, one in the south, and one in the west.
One in the north, one in the. Did we say Southampton?
Southampton is on the list.
David.
So
Is it
David,
going to be a tie?
pressure's on you.
Exeter.
Sophie's
I
already
said
said
Exeter.
Exeter. You are not practicing active listening. So this week's winner for the first time is Sophie.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Hang
I
on,
mean, it's all
Sophie
credit
and
where
Kat.
it's due.
Sophie and
Yeah.
Kat.
So and Kat
Wow.
and Kat. She wasn't that helpful. She couldn't read the map, so it's it was not.
This
not
is
the most
it,
helpful.
Sophie. This is your comeback streak. You're on it. Well done, Sophie. I mean, our geography is appalling, Sophie. We really need to
Between
sharpen
us,
up,
we're not great.
right?
No.
We didn't do that well there, but such is life. Okay, so another game. Thank you very much. That was really good. And now we're going to move on to our Disaster Diaries. It's the start of a new year. And so our Disaster Diary that we got submitted is from one of our London Tech Leader regulars who comes along to London Tech Leaders and trusts us to give them some advice, Sophie. So we're gonna do our best to help them out. Now, this person is lucky enough to have landed a new job, but it's their first step up. So what are they saying to us? They're saying, okay, my first day in a senior tech position begins this week. And honestly, I'm both excited and terrified. I've spent years deep in code and architecture, shipping features and solving fires, but now I'll be measured on other people's success, not just the systems I build. When I've come to a few London Tech Leaders events, I've been slightly worried that some people have said they hated their role when they moved into a CTO, CIO, senior leadership role. I really don't want to have the same happen to me. I think that's probably a good way to start. I've read all the advice: lead with empathy, set clear priorities, understand the org, don't micromanage. Sounds like he's swallowed a book here. But in practice, the stakes feel higher personally. Their question is, how do you balance being a technical authority with being a leader for the team? What's an example of something I can do to get the team together in my first few weeks to create a bit of team cohesion? They want to start strong, but they also want to avoid the classic mistakes of a first-time senior leader. So how do you think, how should we advise them? I've talked about this on LinkedIn a little bit, and it is a worry for people coming up through their career. You know, everybody thinks they want to get to the top, and then when they're there, they're like, I'm here, what do I do? What's your thoughts here, Sophie?
I think this is a really interesting topic, and it's one that we've spoken about before on sort of London Tech Leaders events within our kind of women's events threads. And a lot of it, I think, goes back to identity. Who are you? Who have you been? Who have you grown up being in an organization? Because there's a shift, right? And this person seems very focused on, what am I doing in the workplace? But I think it's really strongly tied to who am I as an individual in the workplace and beyond. I mean, the first thing for me here is to kind of really acknowledge that it's great that this person is thinking about this issue. You would be worried if you weren't. If someone comes in all guns blazing and says, I'm going to make this transition, but I'm not going to be thoughtful about it, or I'm not even going to make the transition. I'll have the title of CTO, but I'll continue, doing kind of pull reviews in the background. That's when you're concerned. But I think, for me, it's really back to the fact that I think most people, particularly people who really hate the CTO role, one of the reasons they might hate it is that they've never sat down and consciously made that decision to choose to stop being an IC and start being a leader. And I think it's a real question for this person. Can you do this? How can you do this? How can you manage that identity shift? How can you think about all of the kind of patterns and behaviors and elements of your identity, or just habits that have made you successful as an IC, which is, probably something that supported your transition into a leadership role? Right. How can you take all of those things, respect them and appreciate them, but almost put them to one side and resist those habits every time a problem comes up and your knee jerk is to go, oh, well, that's okay. I'll come in and fix it, because that's what you've been rewarded for doing for such a long time in your career. How can you kind of almost catch that instinct, stop that behavior, and recognize that when those situations arise, actually it's an opportunity to show up as a leader and to empower your team to develop their own skills. And that's really, how you scale your impact. So, taking that old role of, I add value by solving the hardest technical problems myself, and transitioning into, I can add value by making the right technical problems visible, prioritized, and enabling my team to solve them. So, I mean, David, this must be something that you've kind of come across in your own experience before. How has this journey manifested for you, and what advice would you give to this person?
Yeah, absolutely. It does happen. It's just one day you're sort of just somebody in the team and you think you're pretty good at what you do, and you might have some aspirations for going to the top, and then somebody actually gives you that opportunity, like, oh shit, what do I do? Something. So I think, it was a while back for me, and I'm trying to remember the emotions that I had about it. And I think, there's excitement, and this person says, they're excited for it. And I think that's, you should build on that a little bit. The excitement will carry you forward. I think that there's a little bit for me in there of trust yourself, because if you've got to the point where the people, and if it's an internal promotion, that's great. If it's a job you've applied for, to get into the C-suite, you probably had to go through some rigorous interviews and stuff like that, and you've done it. You've achieved it, right? These people are not still testing you. I mean, they might over the next year, but you've got in the room, right? You're there. You're able, and that's probably because you were confident and capable, and you answered all the right questions about how you would manage. So maybe remember what you said. Remember the thought process that went into answering those questions, and trust yourself that you do know some of the answers. I think, as you said, Sophie, the mere fact they've written in and said, can you help me with this is that self-awareness is really good, right? And that'll help her. In a practical sense, what I like, one of their particular questions is, what sort of a thing could I do to engage the team early days, right? I mean, it depends what kind of organization you're working for, whether there's budget available and stuff like that. But I would go for a combined getting to know you meet and greet with a bit of social slapped on the end, right? There is nothing like doing that in the early days to just kind of cement that and get everybody realizing, particularly if it's not a promotion in an internal company, you don't know anybody, particularly if it's stepping into a new role, which is like a double whammy. I'm more senior than I was, and I've got to meet new people. Just showing them that you're human, showing them that you've got some good experience, you're a capable individual, but also you've got questions, you want to learn from them, you want to understand the world you're in. So I think try and be as human as you can would be my advice there. I think the thing to avoid is to try and make your mark too early, right? Right, I'm the boss now, this is how it is, and start ordering people about and start saying this is how it's going to be. There's some books out there, and we've talked about this before, the whole 30, 60, 90 days, and listen in the 30, observe and everything. In the 90, start asking intelligent questions and hypothesizing, and in the 60, and then in the 90, start saying, okay, here's the way forward, I think, right? Sort of thing. And so I think you don't have to be that hero leader on day one. And finally, I think probably, if it depends how you got the job, what company you're going into, but be honest about it being your first, senior leadership role. Show a little bit of vulnerability. Say, look, this is my first chance, so I might not be spot on with this. And if I'm not, then let's talk about it and work it through. I deal with that with a little bit of humor with my guys. As you know, one of the fractional roles I've just picked up is relatively new. I'm still learning the team and stuff. And I'll start by saying, look, this is just an idea. And guys, if I'm wrong, just tell me I'm wrong. I'm really happy for you to say I'm being an idiot. It doesn't matter, sort of thing. And they all look at you and go, I won't be telling the CIO he's an idiot this week, right? Sort of thing. But you're sort of just opening up that channel for them to come and say, I'm not sure you're that right. That made us feel a bit. So make sure that people know that you're willing to learn your way into the role.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, it's a scary thing to do, to show that vulnerability when you're new. But I mean, I remember the first really excellent manager I had, shout out to Marco, who was a CTO, coming to him with a challenge and say, well, I don't know how we do this. And I've tried to tackle it, but I'm really stuck. Tell me the answer. And I think you have this assumption when you look at sort of your CTO level leadership in a company that, well, yeah, they know the answers, and I'm a bit junior and I'm kind of working on the answer, but if I get stuck, I can just ask them. And he said, well, I don't know, but we'll find out, just in those words. And it was so simple, and it was so inspiring and so endearing. So I think, whenever you get to that moment of nervousness of, oh, is it okay to show vulnerability? Will they tear me to shreds? See if you can think back when you, 5, 10, 15 years ago, whatever it was, when you were in that position and you had a leader who was vulnerable and honest and transparent about what they didn't know, but that the fact that they were going to get there in the end, and that's what's important, how inspiring that was, and how you can leverage that same approach to inspire your team in turn.
I think that's spot on. And I think, when we had Ben on earlier and he was talking about, how people won't remember what you said or what you did, they'll remember how you made them feel, right? Well, we all have a previous manager who made us feel good, made us feel inspired, made us feel encouraged to go in a certain direction and stuff like that. Channel a bit of that. You don't have to be some unique, great person. Just be like a good boss that you once had, right? That's a good start off the 10, mimic somebody else, nick somebody else's good leadership skills and the way that they present themselves, and do a bit of that. You already know the answers, right? The fact that you were able to get here means that somebody spotted that you were talented at some point, right? The fact that you want to be here and that's why you applied for the role means that you feel you do know how to do this. So trust yourself, think about, things you've learned from other good leaders in the past. And crack on, and then get your team to cut you a bit of slack, right? Tell them about it. Just say, look, I might not get that right. If I don't get it right, let's talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm trying to, and I have good intentions, and we have a shared goal, and we want to work on it together. I think it really goes a million miles to say that. So, we're crossing our fingers for you. Whoever you are, keep us posted, and good luck.
Yeah, yeah, that's really great. So listen, anybody wants to submit any of their own disaster diaries, send it across. It can be anything. You've got the idea now, guys, and it'd be really great to hear from you. We love chatting through these things. Sophie, I don't think you and I always have all of the answers. Sometimes it's just interesting to talk through. Problem shared is a problem halved, all that kind of stuff, right?
Absolutely. And I don't think there is any, one objective answer. I think that the sort of all-knowing orb of light might have that. We don't have that. I don't think any human being on this earth has it. But we always, while we only get to sort of support with one per episode, we really enjoy reading all of your stories that you send in. So as David mentioned, you can email those to us at partner@londontechleaders.io, and we'll put that in the show notes as well.
That'd be great. And any quiz ideas you've got, right? We're up for quiz ideas. I mean, Luke's quiz this week was, challenging and interesting, but it kept us on our toes. I'm sure if you're out there and thinking, I'd really like Sophie and David to make fools of themselves doing this, then do please send in that idea, and we'll by all means we'll give it a crack.
Absolutely. And particular prioritization to quiz ideas where I'm likely to win. So, if you know me, write in, get your friends to write in. I think if we have enough votes for a particular, Sophie's definitely going to win this quiz idea, then I will be very pleased.
Yeah, that sounds perfect to me. Well, I think we've had a good chat this week, Sophie. We've covered all sorts of things in the news. Making sure that we're keeping the big billionaire unicorns on their toes. I think they'll do well to listen to us for that. So, really pleased that we're impacting the world out there of technology. We found out about some new stuff going on at CES, I think it's a really exciting time for us to go into 2026. Then we had the lovely Ben on, and we were talking about communication, and Ben came on, and Ben's like a professional communicator and tells other people how to do communication. And so that worked really well. You can find all about Ben in the bio link afterwards. And go and have a look at what he's doing. He's doing in Human Tech Talks as well. That's a podcast I've been on. Really, some really good guests he has on there as well. We did the quiz, as we said, and we've just discussed a disaster diary of somebody stepping into a new senior leadership role and just feeling a bit nervous about that and wondering how they should set up. So hopefully it's been useful for everybody. As always, Sophie, I've really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you have a really good week.
And it's been great fun. And thank you, listener, for sticking with us through to the end of the episode. And we will see you next week.